Hi class, let's take a look at example 3. Now take a second and read it. And example 3 has the following claim. And what they're stating is that the proportion of the green M&Ms, it's greater than 40%. So because of the statement of greater, what we're looking is at a critical region that happens to be of the following form. In this case, they're saying that P is greater than a specific number. We're talking about proportions of percentages. And just as a friendly reminder, this is going to be your test statistic, and that's going to be the information that we're going to be using from the actual sample. Because of the greater statement, we're going to be looking at a right tail test. So remember that on a right tail test, you're going to have, well, technically this is going to be some C-score. This is going to be the value of alpha, and that's going to be the values of C. So we have to be careful on the placement of the value of C. It's not going to be the same as the two-tail test, which were the numbers from the critical values for the confidence intervals. So in this case, let me rewrite the claim, and what we're just going to say is that, well, the proportion of the green M&Ms is greater than 40%. And we're looking at the following sort of a sentence. And then make sure that it is clear that you're explaining in your sentence that P represents, in this case, P represents the proportion of the green M&Ms. Next step is to state the hypotheses. This is what our hypotheses are going to be stated as, because we're looking at a greater and technically here a right tail test. So let me just show the hypotheses. And notice that we're talking about what the statement is given as 40%. Now, the next portion is very important, and it has to do with the critical values. Remember that when you're looking at the critical values, you're looking at a population. So in this case, we're going to be looking at an alpha given, and the alpha that you're given for this test, it's going to be 0.01. So technically the shaded area is 0.01, which makes this portion 99. And let me just show you what that region looks like. So in this case, I did this in advance, and let me zoom in a little bit. Because of the actual value of C being 99, you're going to do an inverse norm, but you have to be careful on this one. It's a 0.99, which I'm showing the code here. And for that, your critical value happens to be 2.33, rounding to 2 decimal places. Remember that the last portion on the rejection region is going to be as follows. We're going to be looking at the sample, and technically we're going to be looking at 2 positions in space. That's going to be here, or technically on this region of the plane. If your test statistic falls under the red, you're going to reject HO. So you would reject HO. If it falls under the no red, you're going to basically state fail to reject HO. Okay, so let's take a look at the test statistic. And with the test statistic, we're going to be evaluating all the information from the sample. And in this case, the information from the sample, we're looking at 57 M&Ms. Only 6 happens to be green, so that would be your successes. And the proportion that we're looking at is 40%. Your p hat is 6 over 57, which is about 10%. And evaluating those values into the formula gives us the following. And let me just zoom in a little bit here. For the test statistic, after we plug it in, we're getting a negative 4.54 or negative 4.54. The actual code, it's a 1 proportion Z test. And it's not letting me write anymore. There we go. And that's given in the actual code here. That's what you see here. It's actually given your test statistic. Here, I just show you the calculation so that it was a little bit clearer. Now, the final portion, it's going to be with respect to the actual test statistic. Remember that the test statistic represents the sample. And if the sample or test statistic falls under the red portion, and notice that the red portion starts at 2.33, you would conclude to reject HO. If it falls under the, let me zoom in a little bit more, under the non-shaded region, you would conclude fail to reject HO. In this case, because your test statistics, it's actually out here on the left, you would fail to reject HO. Let me show you the conclusion. So in here, we would just simply say to fail to reject HO. Technically, the test statistic of negative 4.54 is less than, and the less than refers to it's to the left or on the fail to reject region than the critical value of 2.33. If you're not using the formal writing, you have to make sure you mention both alpha and C for the actual test. And that's actually it for this one. Keep in mind what the test is actually doing in terms of what they're asking us. So the actual value of p hat happens to be 6 over the values of 52, which actually, 57. Now here, this is approximately, I'll just round it to 2 decimal places, 11 or 11%. Now, what they're asking us to test is if there's evidence that the green M&Ms comes from a proportion that is greater than 40%. And in this case, this is the claim that they're using on a grader. Our conclusion is no, there's no evidence. So in that case, the wording is always on HO, and the proper wording would be fail to reject HO. In this case, fail to reject HO means that there's no evidence that H1 is correct or true, except that we use the formal wording of reject HO or fail to reject HO. So in this case, if you look at the proportions, there's no evidence that the proportion of the green M&Ms is greater than 40%. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's equal or it could be less. So that's pretty much what we're saying on the wording. Let me just once display the conclusion. And here, I'm just stating the critical region for this problem. The last portion I wanted to show you was how to reach the actual calculator. Give me just a second. I'm having technical difficulties here with the calculator. Oh, okay, it's showing. So let me just go to the top so I can show you how to run the test. Okay, so to run the test, we're gonna go to stats and then technically test, and it's gonna be a 1 proportion C test. What I'm inputting here is all the information. So your P naught is 0.40. Your X's is equal to 6. And N is equal to 57. For additional problems, they may be asking for the p-value. So you make sure you highlight that portion. And then your answer is going to be here. Here you can see that the test statistic came out to be negative 4.54. They're not asking for the p-value, but here's the p-value on it. And technically here's your p-hat, which is 10%. That was just another way or the code to run the actual test. And that's actually it for this problem.